So we have some speech bubbles up on the screen, and they're blank right now, but we don't want them to be blank very long, so I need your help to fill them in. I'm going to give you a couple quick scenarios, and your job is to fill in the blank with what should be missing. Your kids are out playing, and they are having a great time, but then as you see right around the corner, you see something where they're just about to get hurt. And you're not close enough to save them, so you just call out to them and you say, "Ice cream." Ice cream. They're about to get hurt and you say, "Stop," or you say, "Watch out," something else. Okay, so we say some of these things. You are helping somebody who's not as steady on their feet as you are. You're helping them walk down the street, and then there's a couple stairs. The stairs are up ahead, and you're the kind of person, so you want to point out those stairs in advance, and so you might see the stairs and say to them, yeah, I hear that, watch your step. Yeah, nice job. So you're also walking down the street, and you see that in the neighborhood, there are a couple fences, and you hear a barking dog behind one of the fences, and it's a really loud barking dog. And so on the fence, you see a sign on the fence of the barking dog, and it says something like, yeah, you guys are good. Yeah, beware, caution of that dog. These are the kinds of words that fill signs all over the place. $2 billion this year is going to be spent on warning, danger, and caution signs around the world. We are hungry for these types of signs. Everybody puts out signs like these. I'm sure you know in the OSHA manual, section 1910.145. You do? Oh, you've read it. Good. It's a fantastic section. It is the section called Specifications for Accident Prevention Signs and Tags. And it includes all kinds, pages and pages of details and points and subpoints about what these signs are supposed to look like, what they have on them, and what they don't have on them. Appendix A of that section is super helpful. Have you read that one too? Yeah, it specifies the colors that all these signs are supposed to be. You know, danger signs are supposed to be red, caution signs are yellow, and warning signs are orange, and the hazardous biohazard signs are fluorescent orange. So, and these are super helpful sections to figure out how do we create these signs, because they're all about beware and caution and danger and watch out. Those 4 signs are the opening words of this section we're looking at in Ecclesiastes. Watch out, caution, danger. And as we've been looking through Ecclesiastes so far, there's been a lot of caution and watch out and danger. And remember, Ecclesiastes is the book that says, I've looked everywhere to try to find meaning and significance. I've looked here and I've looked there. I've looked here trying to figure it out. I've looked there. I'm trying to find significance and meaning. And so often in Ecclesiastes, we get to this point, the book gets to this point of basically saying, it's all meaningless. You know, vanity, meaningless, all is meaningless. And it says the best we can do is just enjoy these things while we have them, because everything is just meaningless. And that's sort of where we get to with Ecclesiastes. And trust me, there's a lot more of that to come in the next 7 chapters in Ecclesiastes. But this section we're looking at today is it's like a pause. It's like a nap in the middle of Ecclesiastes. It's like an oasis, a break. Because it's not part of this, it's all meaningless. It's all meaningless. It's vanity. It's just not going to work. It's not all of that. It's this break, and it's about something different. It's about our relationship with God. If we understand one thing about Ecclesiastes, we understand the whole book. And we looked at this a few weeks ago. It's this key word that is throughout the entire book. It's the word hevel. It's the Hebrew word hevel, and it means mist or vapor or these things that just don't last. We get the translation in Ecclesiastes of this meaningless, vanity, all is this way. It's this word. But as we've seen, this word that we get, meaningless, that's just what, That's not all that it is, because it's talking about it in a different way. It's talking about these things as temporary. There's nothing wrong with a lot of these things that Ecclesiastes searches through to find meaning and significance. There's nothing bad about a lot of these things. It's just that they're not going to last. They're fine for now. Friends, justice, people, leadership, food, party, enjoyment, it's fine. But we just can't take it with us. And so when Ecclesiastes says, well, it's hevel, it's like a mist that it's going to disappear. It works for now, but it just doesn't last. And so it's not purposeless and worthless. It's just not going to get us long term anywhere. There's one section in Ecclesiastes that doesn't talk about temporary hevel stuff. And it's this little section. This section is different. It talks about our relationship with God, worshiping God, dealing with God, not as the thing that's not going to last. It's this separate section that talks about it as something, this is the thing that does last. So as we look at this whole section on relationship with God and what it means to walk in, step in, follow in a relationship with God, this is the stuff that Ecclesiastes is saying it's different than all the other things that we've been looking at. This is the stuff that lasts. So we're gonna read the section. There's gonna be a few familiar phrases, I promise, in here that you've heard before, and then we're gonna look at a couple parts of it. So here goes. Be careful what you do when you enter the house of God. Fools go there to offer sacrifices because all they do is sin. But it's best just to listen when you go to worship. Don't talk before you think or make promises to God without thinking them through. God is in heaven and you are on earth, so let your words be few. If you keep thinking about something, you will daydream about it. If you talk too much, you will say the wrong thing. God doesn't like fools. So don't be slow to keep your promises to God. It's better not to make a promise at all than to make one and not keep it. Don't let your mouth get you in trouble, and don't say to the worship leader, I didn't mean what I said. God can destroy everything you have worked for. So don't say something that makes God angry. Too much daydreaming and talk is temporary. Instead, revere God. Would you say that Ecclesiastes believes that a relationship with God is quite important? I would say so. I think quite important, rather important, very important. It talks about it in all these different ways. It's valuable, it's precious, and it's important. How each of our lives and our relationship, we've got to be careful with it, it says. Hold it carefully, treat it carefully, hold it valuably. So what we're going to look at in this section, believe it or not, 7 things, trust me, they'll go fast, 7 things that this section says about being careful with our relationship with God. What happens oftentimes when you go into a church, an old historic church, like some of those big old East Coast churches, or maybe even in Europe, some of those large cathedrals, what do you hear when you walk in the door of one of those old big churches? Not much. Quiet. It's super quiet. Everybody walks in the doors of these things and they feel like, it's kind of awesome. It's kind of huge, but it's also like it steals our words. We don't know what to say because it's meant to inspire awe and take our words away because it's amazing. What we often do is we end up just listening in silence, listening to our thoughts, listening to what we think of because of what we see around us. This section says it's good to listen. When we set foot into a relationship with God, not just church on a Sunday or not just something specific like that, but when we set foot into something intentional about a relationship with God, intending to grow, it's good to listen. We don't like to listen very often. We don't like silence. We don't do silence well. Most of the time when there's silence, we like to fill it with something. Because silence is awkward. Nobody knows what to do with silence. We just have to say something. And so we end up usually saying something that we didn't mean to say, or something that just doesn't matter that much, because we're just trying to fill the silence. It's good to listen, especially in our relationship with God. God has a lot of things to say, and if we say too much, we cover up God's words to us. Listening is a good thing. What does that famous verse from James say? Be quick to listen and slow to speak. And he includes the last step too, slow to get angry. Listening is good because it slows us down. It keeps us slower. It lets us hear things. Let's be careful to listen, Ecclesiastes says. Listening is a good thing. So what does Ecclesiastes say, though, about what most of the people in their day are doing when they come into a relationship with God, or in this case, when they set foot in the temple or set foot in the church, when they're entering a relationship with God? It's talking about these people who are they're bringing all their sacrifices because they're these sinners that are bringing sacrifices. And of course, we all fall short of God, and so their practice in their day was just bring all these sacrifices. And what does Ecclesiastes call them? These people who do all this? It calls them fools. It's kind of harsh. But their word for fools, it means somebody who knows what they're supposed to do, but they just don't do it. They should know, and they do know, they just don't do it. And so they've got to bring this thing to make up for the thing that they knew they shouldn't do, but they did it anyway. And it's just this vicious cycle of, I got to make up for it. And Ecclesiastes says, no, just bring less and seek more. It kind of goes along with the listen part. If we listen, we're just not bringing as many words. And the fewer words we bring, usually the less we're going to get in trouble. And so the fewer words we bring, the more we listen, the less we bring, and the more we can seek and receive from God. The next section says something else. It's interesting what's said next. What was it that the people appeared... Oh, sorry, next section. It's interesting how many times talking comes up. How many times words come up. Listen more, and when you're going to make a promise, you should be thinking about it first, and we got to think about things before we say them. And then this big lesson, the words, this phrase we've kind of heard before, use few words. Let your words be few. Ecclesiastes says, be careful to use few words. I think we all probably know somebody who's one of those people who talks out their thoughts. You know, yeah, some of us do that too, I know. They just verbalize it all. And they don't necessarily think about conclusions before they say them. They're talking out their thoughts. And so they may start here, and they talk, and then they have a completely different viewpoint by the end of the conversation because they're just talking out their thoughts. And talking is not bad. Talking is great. Talking is wonderful. But Ecclesiastes says when we're in the presence of God, it's a time to listen and hear, bring less, seek more, receive these things from God. That's why we start our services oftentimes with silence, because we need to be in a practice, even a short practice, of hearing from God, of listening to God, and being okay with being in silence before God. We can be surprised at the things that God brings our way and the things that God says. There's a church leader who just a couple weeks ago in an article said this. He said, nonstop noise is killing us, numbing our ability to hear truth and eliminating all silence from our lives. The silence essential for prayer, contemplation, and growing in our wisdom. That's exactly what Ecclesiastes is about, growing in our wisdom. I mean, if Solomon writing Ecclesiastes, Solomon wrote Proverbs. Proverbs is all about wisdom. This is about developing a relationship with God. And if we don't listen, if we're not silent ever, we're just not going to hear the words from God. We're going to cover them up with our own words. Now, this next phrase, this is the one in the passage that made me stop when I was reading it. It's the one that made me stop and think, I did not expect that in here. It's this next phrase that says, God is in heaven, and you are on earth, so let your words be few. It's the justification for the part we just looked at. God is in heaven and we're on earth. So just be quiet. Just keep your mouth shut. We're so accustomed, even more so the last number of decades, to seeing God as our friend, to seeing God as our companion, to seeing God as our co-pilot, people say. To seeing God as just right with us and next to us and helping us, which is true. But the downside of that is we lose something about God's majesty and God's distance and God's perfection and God's all everything. God is all everything, and we're all nothing in comparison to who God is. And God is in heaven, and we are not. We need, Ecclesiastes says, to be careful to know our place. We need to know our place. God is in heaven. And the concept that they had of heaven was not up there. It was broad. It was a broad view. And earth is a more narrow view. Kind of like, as we looked at in Ecclesiastes, that has these two phrases, under heaven and under the sun. Under heaven talks about this broad perspective that God has, and under the sun is this narrow view that we have. But God's view under heaven is not distant, it's just broad. So know our place. We're not God. We're not going to be. And the more we know our place, the more we're going to see and understand how all these other pieces fit together. Ecclesiastes spends a lot of time cautioning us about the things that we talk about, and also cautions us about what we give our attention to. Talks in this section about promises. Don't make this promise, make this kind of promise. Speak this way, don't speak this way. It says this: if you're thinking about something, you will daydream about it. If you talk too much, you will say the wrong thing. God doesn't like fools. In other words, whatever we put our minds on, we're going to dwell on that. Whatever we talk about, we're going to dwell on that. Whatever we pay attention to, we're going to dwell on that. Ecclesiastes seems to say, be careful where we fix our attention. I love that passage in Colossians about fix your mind on the things of heaven, not the things of earth. Fix our minds on the things that are broad in God's perspective, not our own perspective, because we're usually going to get in trouble if we do it that way. So where is our attention while at home? Where's our attention when we're outdoors? Where's our attention when we're in the middle of a conversation? Where's our attention when we're worshiping God? Fix our attention on these things. The next part might be the longest part in the whole section, which should give us a little bit of pause because it's the longest section. It basically says that if we promise to God that we'll do something, or we'll be something or do something, then we should do it. And if we're not going to do it, then just don't promise. Let our words be honest. Let our words be true. Let them be full of integrity. It reminds me of the Dr. Seuss book, the Horton Hatches the Egg, where he says, I meant what I said, and I said what I meant, and I meant what I said, and I said what I meant. Elephant's faithful 100%. Did I put that up there? No, I didn't. Okay, so Ecclesiastes seems to say, be careful that we mean what we say. Because God wants our words to match our actions. If we're going to do it, we can say it. But if we're going to do it, don't say it. Don't make that promise to God. Twice, God calls these kinds of people fools. People who know what they should do, and they just don't do it. Let's be careful to mean what we say. The last line in the whole passage in this section, it's perfect for Ecclesiastes. It says, too much daydreaming and talking is temporary. Instead, revere God. Daydreaming and talking, are they bad? No, they're not bad, but what does this say that they are? They're temporary. Can you guess what word that is from what we've learned in Ecclesiastes? Yeah, it is. It's literally that word. It's saying, so we're back to that again. That's the stuff that just doesn't last. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It just doesn't last. What does last? There's the lesson. Revere God. Be reverent. Honor. Bless. Praise. Give all of our honor, our adoration to God as the one who is able beyond us to be able to do it. We're not, and God is. And what if we were able to be reverent to God? That's the thing that lasts. That's not the thing that's temporary. So I wonder, of all these signs, you could say, which one do you feel like you need to hold up to yourself? Or which ones do we feel like we need to hold up to ourselves? I mean, sometimes I feel like I need to hold them all up to myself. But what's a sign that to you stands out as, that's the one that I need to hold out? Ecclesiastes wants us to be careful, because a relationship with God is not just a quick text here and there. It's not just a quick mention here and there. It's not just a nod. This is the thing that lasts. And our investment in a relationship with God, our investment in time with God, our investment in acknowledging God throughout our days, that's the thing that lasts. And we get to start now. So the things that we do now with our relationship with God shapes our relationship with God forever. Would you pray with me?